to introduce our Deputy Chief for Programs in the United States Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service, Jimmy Bramblett. Let's do a sound check, Jimmy, while I'm queuing up your machine there. You're queuing up your machine.
Absolutely. I just want to double check if you can hear me fine.
We got you, Jimmy, loud and
All
clear,
right.
and your machine's coming up. I think we're going to be good.
All right, good deal. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Ray. And just so everybody knows, I threw Ray a curveball. He hit it out of the park. I gave him a presentation yesterday, and I told him, I said, you know, after listening to some of the discussion yesterday, I wanted to make some tweaks and try to really have some slides to point to the information that I was hearing. And so really appreciate your flexibility and your patience with me, Ray, as part of that process.
My pleasure, Jimmy.
Want to just also start off by congratulating Dan, you, Lisa, the board, everybody. Ray, great job, great participation in this meeting. It's exciting to see so many folks want to engage with the National Watershed Coalition at the annual meeting. As Murphy was talking about, for those of us who have worked in this whole arena, and for me, I'm coming up on 28 years of my 34 years with SCS and NRCS, and there is some kind of an emotional attachment with this program that I can't really explain to other folks, but virtually all of you are part of this meeting, understand that and really do appreciate your support along the way. So I'm going to work my way through here. I've got a lot of information I'm going to throw across your radar here, so I'm going to try to be judicious. I don't talk that fast, but I probably will talk faster than normal. Just give you a quick sense of some of the things that I'm going to cover here. And then at the end, be happy to support answering questions or typing those in the chat, however I need to make sure that we're responsive. And I just want to start off by saying thank you to everybody across the board. You know, we're all part of a fantastic delivery system out there across the landscape. This is a map of NRCS offices, but we've got Soil and Water Conservation District offices. Those counties that are out there are often huge supporters and sponsors of a lot of these projects that we have out there across the landscape. And when you think about the projects, basically, this is a map I showed a couple of years ago when we were in Lexington, Kentucky. And what's interesting, and I threw this back in as a result of some of the discussion yesterday, I made a comment at that point in time. You could almost see I-35 and look to the east and see the concentration of projects out there across the country. And the comment I made at that day and time was, there's a lot more projects coming in the west. And a response to that comment was, well, maybe we don't necessarily want that to happen. And, you know, it threw me for a little bit of a curveball. And I said, I think we really do. I'm a more the merrier person. And I'm sitting here thinking, the more folks we can have advocating for these programs at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level, the better success I think we all have across the board. And so as we were talking yesterday about more folks coming in, there was a comment about competition, and I want to encourage all of us to think about that competition. That competition is really not competition with each other. That competition is with other programs and other federal investments. And so what's kind of neat about what we're doing and the way the program is growing and expanding across the country is new ideas are beginning to come in on the table here. So this is just a picture of an irrigation project in Central Oregon. And basically what they're using on the lower left-hand side is some high-density polyethylene pipe. And what that's doing is it allowing them to avoid the evaporation that they had in the old canal system, allowing them to avoid the losses in the to groundwater or seepage that they were having in the old canal system. And then in the upper right-hand corner, what you see there is a power plant. So they're using some of this activity to correlate the irrigation in the water for producers out there, also increasing fish and wildlife habitat for salmon issues that they're dealing with, and allowing water to be channeled through a hydropower system and increase more inexpensive electricity to local communities. And as a result of this and some other projects, the Department of Energy actually has approached us, and we're just at the beginning, the cusp of engagement associated with a memorandum of understanding that they want to pursue. And a big part of that discussion is going to be related to the PL 566 and the nexus that we can create. As Dan mentioned yesterday, PL 566 is one of the most versatile programs we have out there across the landscape. And it affords us opportunities to expand our partnership, our social network, if you will, to others that we don't typically engage with in our other programs. The lower right-hand corner is just some of the innovation about fish bypass associated with this irrigation system project. And again, demonstrating the ingenuity, the creativity of our local sponsors and others involved in these projects to help make sure we address as many resource issues and concerns as we possibly can. And to Murphy's point, highlighting the benefit of all these projects out there across the landscape. And Murphy, just as a quick side note, great presentation. You reminded me of several projects that I worked on, writing watershed plans in the early days of the rehabilitation program. This was in the Atlanta area. And what we did for the real estate comparisons, we could find houses that were closer to a lot of those PL 566 RCD structures, basically right on the water. And we could find that same house several blocks over, and we could compare the values. And if memory serves me correctly, that increase was roughly on average, something like 25%. So from some of the work we've done in the past, they do have a huge, these resources in those lakes do have a huge positive impact out there across the landscape. So by now, many of you have heard, and many of you have participated in discussions about the infrastructure bill. This is basically the breakdown. You saw this yesterday. The one thing that you didn't see here was at the very bottom, and that is the 90-day spend plan that we are under the gun to try and begin to pull together. So we are about to embark on a pretty judicious engagement with our states. Next Monday, we'll have what we're calling an agency coordination workshop with all of our state conservationists, our state engineers, our SRCs, our assistant for programs, basically to kind of help them understand what's in the legislation, what it means for us, what we'll need to do, how we're going to go through the process of having projects identified and selected. And so then we'll follow that up with some refresher training on funding activities, what the limitations and the variations of cost share are, what the agreement protocols will be. Do the same thing with our sponsors and our partners by the middle part of December. And then because of this administration's priority on historically underserved and limited resource areas and travel opportunities, we'll do some outreach activities by the end of December. The nice thing kind of coming along with this is a new national watershed manual. We anticipate it'll be out by the end of next month. I had the chance at one point actually to participate in an earlier version as an author of one of the watershed manuals. And I missed the ball when I had my crack at it. But now that we've come back in and we started looking at it again, and we're trying to align and integrate everything with our planning process in the agency, we noticed really steps 3 and 4 of our planning process are very thin in this manual, in this policy. And that's created a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration out there across the landscape. We're going to offer a lot more clarity in what's needed, and so that a lot of the subjectivity gets off the table, and we can be much more efficient with the clarity in hand. We'll have to do some training associated with that. We'll do that in the January timeframe as well. And then you can see by the end of January, we're hoping to have our projects identified, include those in the 90-day spend plan that'll have to go to the White House or well, we need to get it to the White House, but we'll also have to send it to the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. And then we'll try to release the funds by the middle of February. The other thing we're watching here is this reconciliation language. And what's kind of neat is speaking to the appreciation and the value that all of you have out there across the landscape. Many of you are aware that that piece of legislation originally was $3.5 trillion. What's a few billion dollars here? Now it's $1 trillion. $3.5 trillion, and then it got slashed to $1.75 trillion. The interesting thing here is not one dime of the conservation investments associated with this proposed legislation were sliced. And so the reason I bring this up is not so much for the ASAP, EQIP, and CSP, but it's the RCPP portion of this funding. Should this legislation pass, that funding will grow from $300 million a year to $2.7 billion a year. And the reason I highlight RCPP is because a lot of our authorities under the watershed programs can be used with RCPP funding. So keep a close eye on that. And if that happens, we'll continue to circle back and make sure everybody's aware of all the opportunities out there across the landscape. So yesterday at the beginning of the meeting, a lot of discussion about repairs. It's at any given time, we're working on 3 budget cycles. It just so fortuitous that Dan Siebert and I and a couple of other folks, John Peterson, had some conversations back in the May timeframe. At that time, we're kind of working on we were working on the FY22 budget. So the president's budget gets started in February, a year in advance. They work their way through the whole process. They come back and then basically they do what they call passbacks. And so we were working on what we call passbacks and trying to say, okay, if we get additional money back, what are we going to do with it? And as a part of that process, became aware of this white paper associated with the repair concept and discussion that was taking place yesterday. And so we asked the Office of Management and Budget, hey, we got this need and we got this issue out here. What can we do? And we couldn't get it in the passback, but what we could do is offer up what they call a legislative proposal as part of the overall budget formulation process at the federal level. So we got it included. It made it back and forth through several iterations. I did visit with OMB last week to see where it was in their process. They didn't have a good handle on it at this point, so we're still hoping that it's alive. But we did put in for $100 million a year just for the repair work. And as you all were talking about yesterday, this repair work is something different than rehabilitation. It's something different than operation and maintenance. We're not going to get the amount of money that's needed probably to do all of the work out there for rehabilitating every structure. And even if we did at the federal level, the states and sponsors would have a hard time matching that. So this allows all of us to do some due diligence, make sure that we're doing our due diligence and trying to do everything we can to keep those structures up to speed and as safe as they can be in the interim. The other thing that we're kind of watching is what we used to affectionately call earmarks. Now congressionally directed spending is the new phrase. Over the course of the summer, we had a list of all of those come to us. We had to weigh in on are those duplication of efforts or there's something else that's different, not make a judgment of whether it should or shouldn't be funded, but just kind of help provide some additional information back to the Hill. There were 72 projects on that list for $330 million, and half of those were pegged for the Watershed programs. We have reached back out to our Office of Budget and Planning over at the department. They couldn't give us any more detailed update, but they did say that there's several that are working their way through the system. We do know the final number will be less. We just don't know what it will be and what the mix is associated with some of the Watershed programs. So just be cognizant that that's taking place as far as money is concerned as well. I mentioned the National Watershed Manual. I won't go into that a whole lot more because we will all engage again on that in the not too distant future, but it's really good to see that some of the feedback that I've gotten in the year and a half, 2 years that I've picked the program back up, we're addressing a lot of those comments and we're going to take a lot of the frustration out of the system. So this slide is a little busy. It's a little complicated. So I'm going to slow down here and try to help walk our way through this. And as a follow-up to Murphy's presentation about benefits, one of the things that we as an agency are under tremendous pressure for is to express the investment, the value of the taxpayer investment. And it's not just for our watershed programs, which we have to do for these cost benefit analysis, but it's for all of our programs. And so what you're looking at here is basically a map of water quality related resource concerns. And 2 years ago, we would have never been able to display this map because what we do when we do planning with individual landowners is we used to run all these different models, create a 6-part folder, lock it away in a file cabinet for privacy considerations, never to be seen again. So we rolled out about a year and a half ago, a new software package called CART, Conservation Assessment and Ranking Tool. There's over 3,100 geospatial layers that are driving that system. And what it allows us to do is to use a unidirectional point system, 0 to 100, to say, instead of X tons per acre per year for soil erosion, you're at a point of 25 in relation to a threshold of 50. And that vertical line you see in the upper right-hand side is that natural resource threshold you might think of. So we want erosion to be at or to the right of that line, again, kind of following up on Murphy's red, white, yellow, green, more common approach to, instead of saying tons per acre per year or an index score of 4 or 0.2 reading here, our clients, our sponsors, other folks really can't pick up on that stuff very quickly. It takes a lot to explain. So we're trying to create a situation here where we can say, if you're to the left of this line, we got some opportunities for improvement. If you're to the right, you're doing good. We could do better if you're interested, but that gives you a sense. And these are just natural resource concerns associated with land treatment, the land treatment aspects of the watershed program. So on the county portion of this map, the redder the county is, the further to the left of that vertical threshold bar we are for water quality. The bluer it is, the further to the right you are. And so now what we can do basically is we can say, when we put plan conservation practices out there, what are we going to see as far as that future estimated condition out there across the landscape? But I'll scroll back and forth here for just a minute, kind of help you see how our planners actually are doing a good job. They're making progress. And the other thing that's neat and nice about this is field level data. It's amalgamated up or aggregated up to the county level. We could do it at the state level as we need to. Some of you might be saying, why are you showing me this in the context of a watershed presentation? Well, the reason is, kind of going back to Murphy's presentation, I'm reminded that when I had an opportunity to testify to start off the 2018 Farm Bill to the House Ag Committee, the Senate Ag Committee, one of the things I talked about in the watershed program, and particularly the rehabilitation component of it, is these structures are protecting 180,000 farms, 610,000 homes, benefiting 48 million people a day. And what we know is, and what I personally know is, I put those figures in for Georgia in the 2006, 2007 timeframe. We know that those figures are old, and we know the benefits are much, much higher. You could just look at the aerial photography that Murphy was showing and how the growth is expanding around these structures. So the nexus with that benefit concept, this set of maps you're looking at on the screen, is our watershed programs through the NEPA process, the cost benefit analysis work we do. We all have an opportunity to calibrate, as it were, the point system here that drives what we're calling its card. We also have an opportunity with the system to embed a lot of the other process models like GeoRAS and some of the other H&H analysis that we do. So the efficiency gains of where we're headed is really, really neat. But the key is being able to say, okay, if we make a before project, or for this alternative, we make a quantitative difference of 25 points, what that equates to is X number of homes or X number of people benefiting, or Y number of utilities, or Z number of roads and bridges and things like that. So it's a pretty fascinating approach and direction that we're heading. It'll help us be a lot more efficient. It'll tie our agreements a lot quicker to the projects in hand. You will not be working with grant specialists like we do now at a different agency. We'll bring all this back into NRCS, and you'll be much closer with all of us as we work our way through all these activities. So real quickly here, as I get close on time, I wanted to hit on climate smart agriculture. We have just this week released for EQIP and CSP 33 and 81 conservation practices and enhancements. This is under a mitigation umbrella, and I'm talking about mitigation against climate change, sequestering carbon, reducing the release of greenhouse gases and the like. But for the watershed program, you all have the opportunity to really, we all have the opportunity to really help address the next big thing that's coming. The agency's looking at climate adaptation. And effectively what that means is the frequency and the intensity of storms are changing. They're actually becoming more frequent, more intense. The game board on the right-hand side is kind of an interesting picture to kind of illustrate that concept. And why this is so important from a watershed perspective is most of our traditional conservation practices, the engineering activities related to them, are based off of a 25-year design storm event. So with the watershed program, we can more effectively concentrate higher job approval authority, higher risk higher engineering design needs in a targeted geography with this program, and really probably can help address climate change from an adaptation standpoint better than we're going to be able to with a lot of our other programs. And that effectively may be a lot more impactful than what we can do on a one-on-one basis with individual landowners. And then the other thing I want to mention here real quick is a lot of you are aware that we've been having ongoing discussions. This will be my third iteration with this whole discussion about what are we going to do with our sponsors, our partners, or with these projects out there once these structures have in their evaluated life. We got a lot of good discussion to have about that. There's a huge need to make sure that we're clear, we're on the same page, we speak in unison. So you'll hear more from us on this in the coming year. And then the comment about locally led, we have what we call a state resource assessment. We do need to get the watershed programs into this state resource assessment. This is where we ask state conservationists to notify us how much money they need by variations of programs. We've, up to this point, handled the watershed programs in a little bit of a separate process, but we need to get it embedded with this so it can follow that locally led model that you all talked about. And I specifically chose a river scene here because we have a lot of issues that come up and they fade. Soil health is a good example. Right now, climate smart agriculture and forestry is the current example. But water quantity, water quality is so critical. And the work you all do is always not only addressing the water, but as we address the water, we're also collectively addressing a lot of those other resource issues and opportunities as well. So with that, Ray, I will stop sharing and I will turn the floor back over to you or answer any questions that we might have.
Well, sounds good, Jimmy. We've got one question that we can handle while we're making the adjustment here. When, and I think you might have mentioned this, but let's repeat it for the group. When will NRCS announce the request for proposals for the new PL 566 application?
So we'll be working with the state conservationists between now and the middle part of December. And then we'll announce which projects will be selected. And that was mentioned on my screen, I think by January the 31st. That's our current, and those are target dates, I should just reiterate. Depending on the back and forth that we'll constantly having with the White House and others, those dates could shift a little bit, but that's our current planned schedule.
Excellent. So another question while we've got you handy, and I see Kevin's getting squared around there. That's good. A consulting firm that's working on several watershed plan environmental assessments. They're really finding it difficult to find retired NRCS economists or economists that could, hit that mark, right? What other options do you have for analysis to complete? Does NRCS National have a current list of approved economists that these folks could work with, these consulting firms could work with?
Yeah, really, really good question. And we're having a lot of discussions, not just about retired economists, but the agency actually is hiring more economists this past year and continues to bring on more economists. We've recognized that we had let that particular discipline dwindle to really just a handful at one point. And there's just a huge need to continue to have that expertise in the system. In the interim, we got two tools that we're trying to use. One, and Kevin can speak to this if he wants to, when he comes on, is a set of contracts out there across the landscape for others to be able to bring in and recruit that type of expertise. There's another program we call ACES that stands for, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's retired individuals that want to come back and work for the government, advanced career employees that separated or something like that. But
right.
And Kevin has done a really, really good job of helping make sure that we can get the watershed program authority applied to that program as well. It's a relatively new opportunity for us. And so he's done a fantastic job with that. And I just have to say for everybody, you'd be shocked, maybe not shocked, but Kevin spends a lot of time answering rapid fire questions from the secretary's office, from OMB, from people on the Hill. And so just like you all are working to help advocate for these programs, from your perspective, Generally, when you're asking or pushing for something, we get a call, and Kevin for the Watershed programs has gotten the brunt of those and does a fantastic job of being very responsive, being very accurate with his response, and is a really, really good promoter of the program. So just wanted to have a quick opportunity to pat Kevin on the back while I could do that publicly, and just let him know that he still owes me $20. So.
And Jimmy, you may or may not have been with us yesterday. I think Kevin was, where one of our consultants, one of our consulting organizations actually was bragging about the both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The two of you do. And the folks came in, they helped us out, Agriculture Conservation Experienced Services Program called ACES. So we'll tap that in there and send that out to everyone.
I'm just shocked, Ray, that I could actually come up with different terms for ACES along the way. But that's good. Thank y'all for getting that correct.
Before we let you go, though, there's one that came in that I'm going to have you answer offline, if you can queue up your Q&A there. And it came in on the process for infrastructure funding again. And so if you'll answer that, maybe type in the answer, everybody will get that when you send it to the individual. And then one came in and said, Jimmy, can you come up with a cloning machine for Kevin? So we won't take a vote on it, but I think that, that might be one of those things that you might want to consider. So
all right,
thank you for that. Yeah.
We can certainly use one. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.